Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the joint meeting on the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means and the Senate Committee on Finance. Committee Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Senator Canizaro, Senator Dondero Loop, Senator Goycochea, Senator Harris, Senator Neal, Senator Wynn, Senator Sievers-Gansert, Senator Titus, Assemblywoman Anderson, Assemblywoman Backus, Assemblywoman Brown-May, Assemblywoman Dickman, Assemblywoman Gorlow, Assemblyman Hafen, Assemblywoman Howdigi, Assemblywoman Kazama, Assemblyman Miller, Assemblyman O'Neill, Assemblywoman Peters, Assemblyman Watts, Assemblyman Yeager, and Chair Monroe Marino.
And I am here. Would you please mark Senator Canizaro present when she arrives? I'd like to remind members and those joining us here in the audience to silence your electronic devices. And for anyone that would like to call in for public comment, which will take place at the end of today's meeting, the call-in number is 888-475-4499, and the meeting ID is 832-490-4258, and then press pound. So let's get started. We have on today's agenda a work session on state employees' compensation and benefits. Senator Dondero Loop and I have been working tirelessly with our fiscal staff to come up with a few options to help address what we've all been hearing in absolutely every budget hearing, and that is staffing. Staffing shortage, lack of staffing, and in some areas, critical lack of staffing. So today, you will hear a comprehensive plan of how we hope to address that. First will be a funding retro compensation increases for members of certain bargaining units. Second is retention incentive payments over the biennium. Third is cost of living adjustments, often referred to as COLAs. Fourth, the public employees retirement system state contributions. And fifth, a longevity payment restoration plan. And last but not least, the Public Employees Benefits Program, also known as PEB. We have a lot to cover today, so I ask that you hold all your questions to the end, take notes, whatever you need to do, but do that at the end of the presentation. And with that, we have our fiscal staff at the table, so I invite Ms. Kaufman and Mr. Thorley to begin their presentation.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Sarah Kaufman, Legislative Council Bureau Fiscal Analysis Division. Today, Mr. Thorley and I will be walking you all through a work session document that you have before you related to compensation enhancements for your consideration related to state employees. There will be 4 attachments that are provided, and those will be uploaded to Nellis for view of the public. Many of these enhancements that will be discussed have been already discussed in bills or budgets already heard, and some of these enhancements will be considered by you all at a later date through bill and budget hearing processes. However, as the chair had indicated, both the Money Committee chairs asked us to conduct this work session to walk you through all of the possible compensation enhancements that are being considered in order to provide you with the opportunity to discuss all of the various enhancements inclusively. During the work session, no formal votes will be taken. However, direction it will be sought by your fiscal staff as to how the committee wishes to proceed with these compensation enhancements. With that, again, the Money Committee chairs asked fiscal staff to prepare the work session document before you in order to address the pay disparity that has emerged over the last decade between employees of state government and local government employees, as well as private sector. With that, I will begin with the overview in your document, so page 1. According to a salary survey that was conducted by the Division of Human Resource Management, an average, the state employees are paid an average of 30% less when compared to local governments and private sector. There is an attachment entitled Detachment A that is included in your work session document. and that is on page 21. And I will just take you through an example of what is included in this survey. So looking at page 21, the first occupational class that is on that page is a conservation crew supervisor position. In the survey, they asked the respondents to provide information on the minimum salary as well as the maximum salary. And so you can see in that first example, there were 7 respondents. The respondents could be from Nevada public employers as well as Western states and the private sector. In this instance, there were no private sector employers that responded for this particular survey. Continuing on with this example, the state employee for conservation crew supervisor makes between $48,608 and a maximum of $71,827. In comparison to all respondents, the state employee makes 22.95% less for their minimum salary and 3.29% less for their maximum salary. In comparison with the Nevada public employers, the state employee makes 50.97% less than the Nevada public employers that responded to this survey, and 17.93% less for their maximum salary. And then finally, when compared to all Western states, the position for the conservation crew supervisor actually makes 5.07% more than the respondents that provided in the survey, and 11.36% more for their maximum salary. I won't go through all of the occupational classes. This information is just for your edification. Wanted to provide that to you just as some context, though. So going back to page 1 of your work session document, in reviewing the Human Resource Data Warehouse on March 20th, 2023, there were 23,118 authorized full-time equivalent positions within the executive branch. This is exclusive of boards and commissions, elected officials, as well as Nevada System of Higher Education. There were 5,326 vacant positions for a vacancy rate of 23%. There's been a table that was provided on page 1 that identifies some of the more common positions within the executive branch that have vacancy rates above 20%. And so you can see, for example, the first position is an accountant assistant 3, and they have currently a vacancy rate of 20.3%. At the end of the table, you could see that a highway construction aide has a vacancy rate of approximately 95%. That concludes our overview remarks, and I will now turn it over to Mr. Thorley to begin the discussion of funding of retroactive compensation increases for members of AFSCME and the Nevada Police Union.
Thank you, Ms. Kaufman, and good morning, members of the committee. Wayne Thorley for the record, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. The first option that we will discuss today related to state employee compensation and benefits deals with pay and salary benefits that were included in 2 collective bargaining agreements that were approved by the State Board of Examiners last year, in March of last year. The Board of Examiners approved a revised collective bargaining agreement between the state and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Local 4041, or AFSCME. That included a 3% cost of living adjustment, or COLA, effective retroactively to July 1st, 2021, so fiscal year 2022, which was last fiscal year. As a reminder to the committee, the legislature last year approved a 1% general COLA that was applicable to state employees not covered under a collective bargaining agreement beginning in FY23. The legislature also approved last year a 3% COLA beginning in FY23 to employees of certain collective bargaining groups pursuant to approved collective bargaining agreements. The members of AFSCME in the pay bill last session received a 3% COLA in FY23. FY23. So the retroactive agreement that the Board of Examiners approved in March of last year, after session ended, included a 3% COLA beginning in FY22. So it would be the 3% COLA in FY22 from the revised collective bargaining agreement that wasn't funded by the legislature because that occurred after the legislature adjourned. And then another 3% in FY23 that was funded by the legislature in the pay bill last session. The Board of Examiners also approved a new collective bargaining agreement last year, about a year ago, between the state and the Nevada Police Union, which represents Bargaining Unit G, or Category 1 police officers. That included a 1% COLA in FY23, longevity bonuses of $1,500 for employees with 10 years of service or more with the state, and educational attainment bonuses based on whether the employee has attained an associate's or bachelor's degree. The members the employees, Category 1 peace officers covered by the collective bargaining agreement with NPU, or the Nevada Police Union, received the general 1% COLA in the pay bill last session because that agreement between the state and the union had not been approved at the time, by the time of session adjourned. So the agreement that the Board of Examiners signed on to last March after the legislature adjourned was an additional 1% in FY23. So the 1% that was funded through the pay bill in FY23, and then an additional 1% that was not funded because it was approved after the legislature adjourned. And then on top of the 1%, there's the $1,500 longevity payments, and then the educational attainment bonuses. Your document in front of you has a couple paragraphs on the history of collective bargaining for state employees in Nevada, which comes from the passage of Senate Bill 135 from the 2019 legislative session. And I won't get into that in too much detail, but happy to answer questions at the end if any of you all have questions about that. When the Board of Examiners approved the collective bargaining agreement, the retroactive one with AFSCME, it was estimated at the time that that additional 3% COLA in 22 and then carried forward into 23, because it's not an additional in 23, it's just carried forward, although there was an additional in 23 from the pay bill, but that was funded. The cost of that 3% retroactive COLA was estimated to be $12.8 million in FY22, and then $13.2 million in FY23, for a total biennium cost over the current biennium, the 2021-23 biennium, of $26 million. The estimate from the Board of Examiners did not break out that funding by funding source, so as fiscal staff, we did that analysis, and that is what is on the table at the bottom of page 3. Based on our analysis, you can see that the 3% retroactive COLA for employees covered by the AFSCME collective bargaining agreement, and that at the time was 4 groups. One of the groups now is not currently with AFSCME, but at the time there were 4. And it was estimated to cost the general fund $19.7 million over the biennium, Highway Fund, $2.2 million over the biennium, and then other funds, so this is non-general fund, non-highway fund, so federal funds, fees, other revenue sources, $3.9 million for a total biennium cost of $25.9 million. So our estimate is very close to the estimate that was provided to the Board of Examiners. Moving on to the agreement with the Nevada Police Union. There was also an estimate provided to the Board of Examiners at the time that was approved. That estimate included costs of approximately $768,000 for the 1% COLA, $222,000 for the longevity bonuses, and $745,000 approximately for the educational attainment bonuses, for a total FY23 cost of $1.7 million. Again, the estimate provided to the Board of Examiners did not break that out by funding source, so we undertook that effort as fiscal staff, and that's what's displayed on the table, on the top of page 4. Based on fiscal staff's estimates, the general fund cost for all the compensation benefits in the NPU agreement would cost approximately $698,000 from the general fund, $892,000 from the highway fund, and $160,000 from other funds, for a total biennium cost of a little over $1.7 million. So again, our estimate is very similar to the estimate provided to the Board of Examiners about a year ago. As I mentioned previously, since both collective bargaining agreements were approved by the Board of Examiners after the legislature had adjourned, there was no funding authorized for the compensation benefits included in those agreements. Pursuant to NRS 288505, all collective bargaining agreements with state employees must include a non-appropriation clause, and this clause provides that any provision in the collective bargaining agreement which requires the legislature to appropriate money is only effective to the extent of legislative appropriation. And as required by law, both those agreements that the Board of Examiners approved in March last year included the non-appropriation clause. If the legislature decides to allocate funding for the compensation benefits included in these collective bargaining agreements, so both with AFSCME and NPU, the total cost would be $27.7 million, and that's broken out in the table on the bottom of page 4 by general fund, highway fund, and other funds. I will note there is a bill that has been introduced. It was introduced on Monday, Senate Bill 440. Sections 1 through 4 of the bill it includes general fund and highway fund appropriations to fund the compensation benefits for these two collective bargaining agreements. So the decision for the money committees in the legislature regarding this compensation benefit then would be whether to provide the funding, highway fund and general fund appropriations for these two agreements. And I will turn it back over now to Ms. Kaufman to go through the next section.
Thank you, Mr. Thorley. The next session relates to retention incentive payments of $500 per quarter beginning March 31st, 2023, and continuing on through the 2023-25 biennium. Included in the executive budget was $20 million in 2023 and $40 million in each year of the 2023-2025 biennium to support $500 quarterly bonuses for executive branch employees only. The $500 payments would not be prorated for part-time staff, and as such, the $500 would be paid regardless of full-time or part-time status. In reviewing the human resource data warehouse as of March 26, there were 23,118 executive branch employees, excluding positions that are provided for in the Nevada system of higher education, as well as boards and commissions and elected officials. In order for the legislature to consider the payments of the $500 quarterly retention incentive payments for fiscal year 2023, Assembly Bill 268 was introduced on March 7th and was heard by Ways and Means. In the bill, the governor's office requested that the amount be increased from $20 million to from $20 million to $23 million prior to the introduction of the bill. And the intention to that was so that there would be retention bonuses paid for NSHE professionals as well as the state's share of Medicare taxes. However, the bill as written and introduced did not exclude part-time NSHE professionals or professionals funded through NSHE's self-supported grant contracts or endowment-funded budgets. We reached out to the Nevada System of Higher Education to determine how many positions that they had within the system, and they provided us with a total of 21,539.93 positions, and that included positions whose staff were provided for in letters of appointment, academic faculty, administrative faculty, graduate assistants, hourly staff, classified staff, technologists, postdoctoral scholars, contingent workers, as well as residents. Again, the bill as introduced only excluded employees that were employed with boards and commissions, and to provide these $500 bonuses to all executive branch employees, inclusive of NSHE, that would have cost $44.7 million compared to the $20 million that was originally approved or originally recommended in the executive budget. So you can see on page 6 at the top of your work session document, there is a calculation at the top of the page that identifies the number of positions within NSHE of 21,539, the number of positions in the executive branch of 23,118, which is a total of executive branch employees of 44,657 positions. If a vacancy rate were applied, then there would still require 35,726 positions be provided these retention incentive payments. And for 2 retention incentive payments of $500 to be provided, that would cost $35.7 million. Accordingly, the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means amended Assembly Bill 268 to exclude the Nevada System of Higher Education professional positions. During the Assembly's hearing, they also expressed concerns that the $23 million in general fund appropriations did not include legislative branch, judicial branch, the public employees retirement system. And as such, the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means modified the amount for included in Assembly Bill 268 to include $21 million for executive branch staff, which was inclusive of NSHE classified positions, $325,000 for legislative branch, and $81,000 for PERS. In total, Assembly Bill 268, as amended by the Assembly, provided $21.4 million for those employee groups. During the bill hearing in the Senate Finance, the Committee on Senate Finance, the Nevada System of Higher Education requested that full-time NSHE professionals that are funded in the state-supported budget be considered for these retention bonuses. They suggested that the employees that receive a salary of less than 95% of the governor's salary be provided these bonuses. That would account for 3,846 positions. They also provided a second alternative, which was to provide NSHE full-time professionals who are in the state-supported accounts that make less than $100,000 be provided retention incentives. That would provide retention incentive bonuses to 3,029 full-time NSHE professionals. As such, if those individuals were included in the retention incentive bonuses, between $3 million and $3.8 million would have been required to be added to the $21.4 million that was provided for in Assembly Bill 268 as amended. The Senate Committee on Finance approved providing a flat $3.5 million to the Nevada System of Higher Education for professional staff, and provided clarification to NSHE indicating that they could utilize other existing funds to supplement that so that they could provide those bonuses to the Nevada System of Higher Education professionals for retention bonuses. That bill was sent back to the Assembly, and the Assembly concurred with it yesterday March 29th. And so that leads into the second portion of this, which is the additional retention incentive bonuses for fiscal years 2024 and fiscal year 2025. If the Money Committees wish to consider the passage of additional one-time retention bonuses in the same manner that the Assembly approved, they would provide retention incentive bonuses for executive branch employees, judicial branch employees, legislative branch employees, PERS, and the classified staff of NSHE in the amount of $42.8 million. And that would provide the funding for those retention bonuses for those groups. However, if the Money Committees chose to consider applying the methodology that the Senate used, then a flat amount would also be provided for the NSHE professionals in an amount of $7 million, and a total of $49.8 million would be required in each year of the 2023-25 biennium. If the committee desired an option that would not require an additional general fund appropriations, the committee could consider providing retention incentive bonuses of something less than the $500 that is recommended by the governor. For example, a quarterly bonus of $250 could be considered, which would cost $24.9 million if the methodology that was used by the Senate is applied, where the Nevada System of Higher Education would get a flat $3.5 million to be provided for their NSHE professionals. And so on page 7, there is a dark gray box that includes the decisions for consideration by the committee for this particular option. And the options include whether to include general fund appropriations of $42.8 million in each year of the 2023-25 biennium, to fund retention incentive bonuses of $500 per quarter for staff of PERS, the legislative branch, judicial branch, executive branch, and NSHE classified staff only. The second option would be whether to approve general fund appropriations of $49.8 million in each year of the 2023-25 biennium to fund retention incentive bonuses of $500 per quarter for staff of PERS, the legislative branch, judicial branch, executive branch, and NSHE classified staff, as well as a flat amount of $7 million for NSHE professionals. And finally, the third option would be to whether to approve general fund appropriations of $24.9 million in each year of the 2023-25 biennium to fund retention incentive bonuses of $250 per quarter for staff of PERS, the legislative branch, judicial branch, executive branch, inclusive of NSHE classified staff, and include a flat amount of $3.5 million for NSHE professionals. That concludes my remarks for that option. And Madam Chair, if you'd like, I can move now to option 3, which is the cost of living adjustments in the current biennium as well as the 2023 biennium.
Yes, please do.
Okay.
Continue.
Moving on to the next option for consideration by the Money Committees. The governor recommended 8% COLAs, or cost of living adjustments, for those state employees who received a 3% cost of living adjustment in fiscal year 2023. And he recommended a 10% COLA for those state employees that received a 1% cost of living adjustment in 2023. The governor also recommended a cost of living adjustment of 4% for all state employees in fiscal year 2025. The state salaries of state employees have not kept up with inflation over the last several decades. And there were two significant events that really impacted the policy decisions that surround the state employees' wages, which include the Great Recession, which occurred from December of 2007 to 2009, as well as the coronavirus pandemic. In your packet, there is an attachment which is entitled Attachment B, and that can be found on page 27 of your packet. And I'll just walk you through this attachment briefly. This attachment includes information related to classified employee salary increases and decreases approved by the legislature in comparison with the CPI comparison. And so you can see we went back all the way to 1979 because that's the actual information that we had, so we thought, why not? Let's give that to you. So we went back to 1979, and you can see in the first half of your page, from 1979 to 1999, really there were consistent COLAs that were provided by the legislature, and they were being offset also by the CPI or inflation. And so you can see that right off the bat from 1979 on, the wages were not keeping up with inflation. And going all the way to 1999, you can see on the last column of that table that staff has provided you, the cumulative effect of how salaries have changed in comparison to the CPI. So just looking at 1999, you can see that from 1979 to 1999, salaries had lagged approximately 14.3%. As we get into the second half of that page, fiscal staff provided some comments in the notes and other legislative actions column so that we can make you aware of some of the policy changes that were made during those legislative sessions that impacted the salaries of state employees, but weren't necessarily the COLAs or the inflation that are being provided for in the two columns to the right of the comments. And so you can see, for example, in fiscal year 2020, or excuse me, 2002, unclassified salaries were actually increased by 9%. And you can also see that there are comments in here that take into consideration some of the grade increases that were approved by the legislators during that time. So, for example, there were 2 grade increases for certain engineering personnel. And so those comments try to reflect some of the policy changes that were made during that time, but not necessarily is reflective in the COLAs and the CPI comparisons that are provided in this table. If you turn to page 28, this page provides a period which is really difficult to quantify. So the period of 2009 to fiscal year 2022, there were a number of policy decisions during that time which impacted state employees' salaries, but aren't necessarily reflected in the COLAs or the CPI. And so I'm going to try and walk the committee through some of those policy decisions that were made during those times, which reflect both the Great Recession as well as the time related to the pandemic. So beginning in fiscal year 2010, the legislature approved 12 furlough days for state employees. That equated to a 4.6% salary reduction. During that time, the legislature also suspended merit pay increases as well as longevity. Those decisions were continued on into fiscal year 2011. And so you can see in the grayed out cells, there were no COLAs provided, but that was not necessarily reflecting the fact that state employees were still going through and providing the furloughs and the 4.6% salary reduction that was provided for in fiscal year 2010. Moving on to fiscal year 2012, the legislature decided in lieu of the 96 hours of furlough or the 12 furlough days, the legislature approved a 2.5% salary reduction as well as 6 furlough days, which equated to about a 6.8% salary reduction. They also continued to suspend merit salary increases as well as longevity. That was then continued on into fiscal year 2023. In 2024, the legislature eliminated the 2.5% salary reduction from the prior year, but still required still required state staff to take 3 furlough days. And again, the longevity was still suspended at that point in time and continued to suspend the merit salary increases in that year. In 2015, the same salary reductions were applied for the furlough days in 2015, and merit pay was restored. In fiscal year 2016, the legislature eliminated furlough requirements, which equated to about an increase of 2.3%, and they provided a 1% COLA. So in the grade cell to the right, you could see that it reflects a 3.3 increase, but that really just reflects the 2.3% restoration of the furloughs as well as a 1% COLA. In the next 5 years, the legislature provided consistent cost of living adjustments. But as you can see, when we get to fiscal year 2021, state employees were required to take 6 furlough days for a 2.3% salary decrease. Those furlough days were not carried through to fiscal year 2022, and as all of you are aware, those furloughs were actually restored using the American Rescue Plan Act dollars. So turning back now to page 8, what that table doesn't reflect as well are is the erosion of net pay that state employees have experienced as contributions made to PERS have increased over the last several biennium. So just to give you a comparison, a state employee in 2009 contributed 10.5% to their PERS retirement as a regular member on the employee-employer paid plan. In 2024, a state employee will contribute 17.5% as a regular member on the employee-employer plan. Similarly, a state employee in 2009 contributed 17.25% on the police-fire employee-employer plan. And in 2024, police-fire is recommended to contribute 25.75% in the employee-employer paid plan. That's hard to say a few times. During the Public Employees Benefits Program hearing on February 17th, the agency shared a survey that was conducted by that agency from state employees that asked the participants to rank a list of set employee benefits from most important to least important. And that ranking is provided on page 8 with the number one priority from state employees as identified as higher wages via salaries. In order to address the issues identified as most important to state employees, the chairs of the money committees asked fiscal staff to prepare estimates of how much it would cost to initiate a 2% COLA effective April 1st, 2023, in addition to the COLAs that are recommended in the executive budget from the governor. Accordingly, there's a table on page 8 that identifies the costs, and as you can see, general fund appropriations would be additional general fund appropriations of $5.7 million would be required, as well as $566,000 in highway fund appropriations and $2.5 million in other funds. And that is specifically just for fiscal years 2023, so it would be from the period of April 1st to June 30th of 2023. If the 2% COLA noted in that table above, or in the table that we just discussed, was added to the COLAs that is being recommended by the governor, a total of $570.3 million would be required, which is inclusive of general fund appropriations of $354.8 million, highway fund appropriations of $71.4 million, and $144.2 million for other funds. There's a table on page 9 that walks you through how we came up with those calculations. And I would just note that there is a 20% vacancy savings factor that is applied for executive branch, judicial branch, and legislative branch associated with the 2024 and 25 calculations. We did not take into consideration a vacancy savings for PERS and TRPA since they don't have the economies of scale in order to determine that they can absorb that 20% fiscal or vacancy rate. And for the Nevada system of higher education, a factor was applied that is based on the general fund component that is provided to Nevada system of higher education. In the past biennia, COLAs have been adjusted for NSHE in order to account for the general fund percentage that is applied to their budget. So that percentage was also applied then to this calculation. So you can see in 2023, the table indicates that 62.7% would be provided to NSHE to provide for that 2% COLA. And then the calculation is slightly adjusted for fiscal years 24 and 25 to 65.9%, which is reflective of the composition of their budget. And so decisions to be made by the committee is whether to approve funding for a 2% cost of living adjustment effective April 1st, 2023 for all state employees, and or fund the cost of living adjustments beginning July 1st, 2023 of 8% for those employees who receive a 3% cost of living adjustment in fiscal year 2023 and a cost of living adjustment of 10% for those employees who received a 1% cost of living adjustment in 2023, and or also to consider funding a cost of living adjustment beginning July 1st, 2024 of 4% for all state employees. That concludes my discussion on the third compensation enhancement. And Madam Chair, if it's okay, I'll proceed to the fourth compensation enhancement.
Thank you. Yes, continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the next compensation enhancement for discussion is the Public Employees Retirement System state contribution. Pursuant to Chapter 286 of the Nevada Revised Statutes, contribution rates are set based on the results of even-numbered fiscal year valuations. PERS contribution rates have been increasing over the last several biennia. Using the current statutory provisions regarding state employees, the employee and the employees on the employer paid plan will incur an increase to their rates of 3.75%, while the employees on police fire for employer paid plan will have an increase of 6%. Moving on to employer paid plan. I'm going to get through this one, I promise. Employer pay plan, regular members will have an increase of 2%, and for those on the police fire, members will have a 3% pay increase, contribution increase. The actuarially determined contribution rates for regular fund as well as police fire fund are comprised of normal costs, which include the present value of pension plan benefits and expenses. It also includes the unfunded actuarial accrued liability amortization payments, which are excess of accrued liability over the value of assets. And it also includes the administrative expenses. And so we've provided you with a table on page 11 that walks you through these various rates over the last several years, from fiscal year 2015 to fiscal year 2022. And so you can see for normal costs, just taking a look at fiscal year 2022, normal costs equated to about 18.79%, whereas the amortization costs were approximately 18.58%, and the administrative costs were approximately 0.2%. Now, there was a phased-in smoothing mechanism that was applied by the PERS board this biennium, and that is to try to reduce or alleviate some of the increase in contributions that are being reflected or are being passed on to the state employees. When that phased-in smoothing percentage is applied, the total prior adjustment for fiscal year 2022 would have been 33.61%. And so if you turn to page 12, you can see that reflected for the four various plans for fiscal years 2024 and 2025. As indicated in that previous example, the amount was 33.61%, and that is typically rounded to the nearest 1/4%. So you can see that the amount being recommended in the executive budget is 33.5 for the employer pay rate associated with that contribution. So I'll just take you briefly through the four retirement rates. And so for the employer paid rate for 2024, the employee would pay 17.5%, employer would pay 17.5%. And then for police fire, the employer paid rate, the employee would pay 25.75%, and the employer would pay 25.75%. For the employer paid rate for police fire, that would be 50%. During the joint meeting of the Assembly Committee of Ways and Means as well as the Senate Committee on Finance on February 13th, the committee expressed concerns with the increases in contribution rates and asked the system to provide the committee with options for it to consider to reduce some of these contribution rates. In talking with the system, they indicated that most public pension plans either set a maximum statutory rate or percentage that employees pay, or they require employees to pay at least 1/2 of the normal benefit costs for the contribution rates. And so the table on page 12 identifies what it would look like if the state were to move to a contribution payment mechanism where the state would essentially, or excuse me, where the state employee would pay only 1/2 of normal costs, and the state would pick up the rest of those costs. And so you can see, just looking at the regular employer paid plan, the statutory rate is 35%. The employer currently would pay 17.5%, but under the 1/2 of normal benefit scenario, the state would pick up 24.91% of the costs, while the employee would pick up 10.09% of the costs. So that would be an increase of 7.41% that the state would pay for the retirement benefits of state employees. You can see on page 13 that we asked PERS to provide us with an estimate, and the estimate on page 13 is provided by their actuary. You can see that it would cost approximately $140.3 million in 2024, and $145.2 million in 2025. Fiscal staff has also ran some calculations through our budgeting system to see if the calculations that we provided were within reason as well. And you can see on page 13, there's a table on the bottom of page 13 that indicates that our estimates were approximately $132 million in 2024 and $142 million in 2025. Fiscal staff's calculations are about $11.3 million lower over the 2023-25 biennium when compared to the PERS actuary estimates, because fiscal staff used the projected payroll for fiscal years 2024 and 2025 based on all of the positions that were included in the executive budget, whereas PERS actuary utilized 2022 amounts and applied a 3.5% payroll growth for that. But they are fairly within the ballpark of each other. And so the decision to be made by the committee is whether to approve an adjustment to the percentage of contributions made by the state to the public employees retirement system on behalf of the state employees from the current 50% of statutory contribution rate to a total statutory contribution rate less 1/2 of the normal costs. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Thorley to continue with the next option.
Thank you, Ms. Kaufman. Wayne Thorley again for the record, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. I will now be going over some options for you all regarding longevity payment restoration for state employees. Longevity payments for state employees were first instituted by the Nevada Legislature in 1973. However, as a result of the the Great Recession's result or impact on state revenues, caused the legislature in 2009, 2011, and 2013 to suspend longevity payments. So over 3 biennia, longevity payments were suspended. Ultimately, the 2015 legislature passed AB 436, which repealed the longevity payment provisions from statute entirely. So the last longevity payments for state employees occurred in the 2007-2009 biennium, so almost 15 years ago. The way longevity worked for state employees under the old structure prior to payments being suspended and the statute being repealed said that after 8 years of service, an employee would receive a semi-annual payment of $75 with an increase of $25 each year from the 9th year to the 14th year. So you start with semi-annual payments of $75 and then go up by $25 each year through the 14th year. From the 15th year through the 24th year of service, the semi-annual payments were increased each year by $50, and then from the 25th year all the way through the 30th year of service, the semi-annual payments were increased by $75 per year, which resulted in a maximum semi-annual payment amount of $1,175 in longevity payments. Under the prior statutory provisions, NSHE professional employees were not eligible for longevity payments. The table on page 14 provides fiscal staff's estimate of what it would cost to restore longevity payments under the prior statutory construction. However, PERS contributions are not included in this table, so this is the cost simply to provide the payments to the employees, assuming they would not be subject to PERS contributions. As you can see, it would cost a general fund cost of $4.5 million in FY24 and $5.1 million in FY25 to restore longevity payments. For the highway fund, that would be about $1 million in 24 and $1.2 million in 25, and then other funds, $1.7 million in 24 and $1.9 million in 25, again, to restore longevity payments under the prior statutory structure. While the dollar amounts provided in that table assume no PERS contributions, NRS 286.025 does indicate that longevity payments are considered compensation and subject to PERS contributions. However, when longevity payments were in place, they were treated a little bit differently than regular salary when it came to PERS contributions. As you all are aware, there's two retirement options. One is the employer pay plan, and one is the employee-employer pay plan. Under the employee-employer pay plan, the state is responsible for half of the rate, and then the employee, through a deduction from their paycheck, pays for the other half. Under the employer pay plan, the employee is responsible for half the rate also, but that comes in the way of a salary reduction, and then the state then pays the other half. Under longevity payment structure, though, employees on the employer pay plan were not paying their half through a reduction in the longevity payment. So this is illustrated in the table on the top of page 15 of your work session document. So this provides a comparison of two exactly similarly situated employees. We assume this is an employee with 15 years of service, which they would get a longevity payment of $275, assuming the prior statutory structure. You can see that for employees on the employer pay plan, the entire 33.5% rate was paid by the state. That was a $92 contribution. So the total cost to provide the longevity payment was the $275, the longevity payment, the $92.13 for the PERS contribution, for a total of $376 or $367.13. But the employee's net pay was the $275. That's what they got. For an employee on the employee-employer pay plan, again, 15 years of service, $275 longevity bonus or payment. They actually had to pay 17.5%, and so that was their amount that they got was reduced by $48.13, which means the state share was a little bit less than under the employer pay plan because the employee was picking up half the cost. And so you can see the net employee payment was $226.88 on a bonus of $275. So there are some options for you all to look at regarding if there is an interest in restoring longevity payment, to look at how PERS contributions are applied depending on whether the employee is on the employer pay plan or the employee pay plan. The table in the middle of page 15 provides the costs, which this is in addition to the table on page 14, so you would add those costs together. To provide longevity payment, including PERS contributions, where there is no reduction in the payment for those on the employer pay plan. So this is what was in place prior to the suspension. So that's the cost that it would be for that. On the bottom of page 15 then is another option. This would be again added to the costs in the table on page 14 to treat PERS contributions for longevity payments exactly like PERS contributions are treated for salary, where there is a reduction in the amount for those on the employer pay plan. And another option that the committee may wish to ask fiscal staff to explore would be exempting longevity payments from PERS contributions altogether. That cost would be just the cost that's provided on page 14. So the decision then for the money committees to consider are the following. So whether to restore longevity payments that were repealed in 2015 for state employees, and that would exclude NSHE professional positions, as was since they were excluded previously, or restore longevity payments and include NSHE professional positions. So those are two options. And then with either of those options, so whether to include or exclude NSHE professional positions and longevity payments, you all have the following three options. You could fund PERS contributions consistent with prior longevity payments. This is where the state covered the entire cost of the contribution for those on the employer-paid plan. You could fund PERS contributions consistent with existing policy for salaries. This would require the employee to be responsible for a portion of the PERS contributions related to longevity payments under either plan. Or C, exempt longevity payments from PERS contributions altogether for state employees. And then, Madam Chair, if it's okay, I'll move on to our last section here.
Thank you. Yes, continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Wayne Thorley for the record, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. The last benefit or compensation and benefit area that we'll discuss relates to the Public Employees Benefits Program, or PEB, and specifically talking about additional health savings account, or HSA, and health reimbursement arrangement, or HRA contributions. The budget recommended by the governor for PEB for the upcoming biennium maintains current benefit levels, which includes a HSA base contribution of $600 per year for participants on the consumer-driven health plan, or also known as the high deductible plan. So real quick, a health savings account is it's a savings account owned by the participant, and it allows the participant to set aside money on a pre-tax basis to pay for qualified medical expenses. Contributions to the health savings account can be made by both the employer and the employee. It's owned by the employee, it's portable, and again, if it is used for qualified medical expenses, that money is not taxed. Under federal rules, HSA contributions to an HSA may only be made if the individual has a high deductible health plan, which the consumer-driven health plan is. So, also, just over half of PEB participants are enrolled in the consumer-driven health plan. Although not everybody on the consumer-driven health plan are eligible for an HSA under federal rules. So the point here is not all PEB participants can have an HSA. And if you don't have an HSA, you don't receive the $600 base contribution to the health savings account that is in the governor's recommended budget. In December last year, the PEB board also approved a one-time $300 supplemental contribution for all state employees for HSA and HRA contributions. So a health reimbursement arrangement, HRA, and sometimes you'll hear it referred to as a health reimbursement account, same acronym, HRA. It's an employer-funded group plan from which employees are reimbursed tax-free for qualified medical expenses. The employer owns the HRA, which means the employee can't take it with them if they leave PEB. Under the action approved by the PEB board, and this is also included in the governor's recommended budget, if you are eligible for an HSA, you're on the consumer-driven health plan and eligible to have an HSA account, you would get a $300 one-time in FY24 supplemental contribution. And then if you're on any of the other health insurance plans, or you're on the high deductible plan but you don't qualify for the HSA, you would get a one-time in FY24 $300 supplemental HRA contribution. The table in the middle of page 17 lays that out, what I just explained. So with both the base HSA contribution in the governor's budget plus the one-time supplemental HSA HRA contribution in the governor's budget, employees with an HSA would get $900 in FY24 and $600 in FY25, and employers with an HRA would get $300 in FY24 as a result of the one-time supplemental, and nothing in FY25 because the supplemental is only FY24. In order to provide enhanced benefits to PEB participants to help them pay for healthcare expenses, the money committees may wish to consider including a general fund appropriation to provide additional supplemental payments for HSA and HRA contributions beyond what is included in the executive budget. Also, the money committees may want to consider an option to have any additional HSA or HRA contributions be on a sliding scale depending on the coverage tier selected by the individual. One option for the money committees could consider would be the following on the sliding scale. For those on the participant-only coverage tier, so this, real quick, all PEB health insurance plans and options have 4 coverage tiers. There's the participant-only tier where it's only the participant that is covered. That would be the employee. There is the participant plus spouse tier. Then there's the participant plus child or children tier. And then there's the participant plus family tier. And again, those tiers are available regardless of which plan the employee chooses. An option then for the money committees to consider would be providing, beyond what's in the governor's budget, an enhanced payment, HSA, HRA of $300 in each fiscal year of the upcoming biennium for those on the participant-only tier, $400 in each fiscal year for those on the participant plus spouse or participant plus children tier, and $500 for those on the participant plus family tier. So you see that it would increase depending on which tier you're on. What I just described is illustrated in the table on page 18, which lists both the base amount, that's $600 for HSA, the supplemental amount approved by the PEB board, the $300.24 for both HSA and HRA, and then plus the optional enhanced amount depending on the sliding scale. So you'll see, I'll take just the participant plus family tier. With the for HSA, with the $600 base payment, the $300 supplemental amount in 24, and the optional enhanced amount of $500 in both 24 and 25, the individual will get $1,400 contribution in 24, an $1,100 contribution in 25, and then for those with an HRA, they'd get $800 in 24 and $500 in 25. The cost to provide the optional enhanced amount beyond what's in the governor's recommended budget on this sliding scale, which I just discussed, is listed in the table on the top of page 19. The total cost in FY24 would be $9.3 million, and in FY25 would be $9.5 million. The money committees may wish to, if there's a desire to fund these enhancements, may wish to do it with general fund contributions. General fund is not generally provided to PEB. However, given that PEB is currently preparing for open enrollment in about a month and going through preparing their marketing and information materials, it would be very difficult for them to make any plan design changes So general fund appropriations could be used as an alternative revenue source to fund this, and therefore would not impact anything that PEB is planning as far as premiums go and state contributions for PEB. So the option then for the money committees to consider is whether to include enhanced HSA or HRA contributions, and potentially on a sliding scale depending on the coverage tier. And I will then turn it back over to Ms. Kaufman. Then we have 2 more attachments to go over with you all.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Sarah Kaufman, Legislative Council, Bureau of Fiscal Analysis Division. In order to provide the committee with a global view of what this might look like to a specific state worker if all of these recommendations were incorporated and approved by the legislature, we provided an example of this impact on page 29. So there are 3 examples there of just specific state employees. So the first example we provided just to illustrate what impact this might have on state salaries is the example is provided as an administrative assistant 3 who is a grade 27, step 6, has been employed with the state for 7 years and is on the regular employer paid retirement. Currently, that individual's wage is $45,601. They provide contributions to PERS of $7,068. They, for simplistic purposes, we provided a federal tax of 10% for $4,560. And we indicated that they are on the insurance for participant and family, which would cost roughly $3,924 each year. So their net annual pay is $30,049 currently. Under the governor's recommendations in the executive budget, this individual would receive a 10% COLA in 2024, a 4% COLA in 2025, and a $2,000 bonus. Therefore, their wages would increase to $52,168 with an additional $2,000 for a bonus. Their net annual pay would be $35,825. And if the committee were to consider all of the options that were provided to you today, that would include a 2% COLA in 2023, a 10% COLA in 2024, a 4% COLA in 2025, a $2,000 bonus, PERS contributions being reduced to 1/2 of normal costs, and longevity restored. That individual would receive wages of $53,211 with an additional $2,000 bonus. The PERS would be reduced to $5,321, and their net income would be $40,373. So essentially, their gross pay would increase under all these scenarios by 21.1%. However, their net pay would increase by 34.4%. Moving on to the second example. The second example includes an IT professional 4 who is a grade 42 and a step 9. This individual has been with the state for 17 years on the regular employer paid retirement plan. Currently, this individual makes $101,164 in gross salaries. Their net pay is $71,443. Under the governor's recommendations for COLA increases and bonuses, this individual would receive $115,732 in wages with an additional $2,000 bonus, and their net annual pay would be $81,909. Under the recommendation or under the options that have been discussed with you all today, that individual would receive $118,046 in wages with $2,000 in bonus, as well as, I apologize, there is a typo on this. That $375 for longevity should actually be $750 because there are 2 payments that are applied for the year. And so I'll give you the corrections to you on the percentages as well. But the net impact would be $92,578. And the gross increase, gross pay increase would be 19.4 as opposed to 19.0%. Net pay increase would be 30.1% as opposed to the 29.6%. And then finally, the third example is a correctional sergeant who is a grade 37, step 10, who has been employed with the state for 8 years and is on the police fire employer paid retirement plan. Their wages are $84,229, and their take-home pay right now is $52,720. Under the governor's recommendations, this individual would receive an 8% COLA in fiscal year 2024, since this individual likely received the 3% COLA in 2023. And they would receive the 4% COLA in 2025 with a $2,000 bonus. Accordingly, the governor's recommended budget would have $94,606 for this individual with a $2,000 bonus, and their net annual pay would be $58,788. Under the enhancements that are discussed in this work session document, again, this individual will receive a 2% COLA in 2023, an 8% COLA in 2024, a 4% COLA in 2025, $2,000 bonus, and PERS contribution reductions to half of normal costs, as well as longevity restored. And so you can see that individual would receive wages of $96,498, as well as a $2,000 bonus, $150 for longevity pay. Their PERS contributions would be 16.75% as opposed to what is currently recommended in the executive budget of 25.75%. And their wages, their net annual pay would be $68,624. So gross pay would increase by 17.2%, and net pay would increase by 30.2%. With that, I will turn it over to Mr. Thorley to provide a summary on the last attachment.
Thank you, Ms. Kaufman. Wayne Thorley for the record, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. So we've thrown out a lot of numbers at you this morning. The information on attachment D is our attempt to summarize all of this information for you. Attachment D is for those in the audience and watching online. Attachment D is posted as an exhibit on Nellis. What Attachment D does is includes the cost for all the various options that we discussed with you this morning, broken out by funding source. That's the top half of the table. And that I'll go through really quickly. So the funding source columns are broken out by fiscal year, so you can see the cost by fiscal year for the general fund, the highway fund, and other funds. Then as you go down the table row by row, you'll see the various options that we discussed. So the first row is the COLAs, the cost to provide the COLAs that were included in the governor's recommended budget. The second row is the cost to include the COLAs for the collective bargaining agreements with those bargaining groups that we discussed at the beginning of the meeting. The next two rows relate to bonuses. that we discussed, so the cost to provide the bonuses in '23 and then also in '24 and '25. The next group of rows relates to longevity. The first row under longevity is what I would call the base cost, and then the other two rows you would add to the base cost depending on what is chosen. So whether longevity payments, the PERS contributions for longevity payments would be treated as salaries are or not. Then there's the additional 2% COLA. This is beyond what's recommended by the governor, which would be effective beginning April 1st of this year. Then the cost to cap PERS contributions at half of normal costs. Then the cost to provide the enhanced HSA or HRA contributions for PEB participants. The total cost of all those enhancements are on the total enhancements line. For the general fund for FY23, the cost would be $51 million. For FY24, the cost would be $293.4 million, and for FY25, $359.1 million. And then moving along the table, you can see the cost for the highway fund and other funds. So how do you all pay for this? So that's the bottom half, or how could you all pay for this? That's the bottom half of the table. So that lists the funding that was set aside in the governor's budget for the governor's recommended salary and compensation benefits. The amount set aside in the governor's recommended budget for COLAs, so you'll see the first two lines, which say general fund salary adjustment, highway fund salary adjustment. It appears to be much larger than what is actually needed to provide COLAs as recommended by the governor. And the reason for that is twofold. First, the estimate that is that was used to prepare the numbers for the governor's recommended budget for the COLAs assumed that all positions, regardless of funding source, would have their COLA paid for by the general fund. Not all employees are paid by the general fund. Some are paid by the highway fund, and some are paid by other funds. It has been the past practice of the legislature to fund COLAs dependent on how the position is funded. So if the position is a general funded position, then the COLA would be funded by the general fund. If it's a highway funded position, it would be funded by the highway fund. Or if it's funded by other funds, then it would be funded by those other funds and not by the general fund. So that's why the general fund amount included in the governor's budget could be higher than what is needed if the legislature chooses to go with historical budget practice. Also, as we discussed on Monday, there's statewide decision units. One of them is the M300. It is the fringe benefit rate adjustments decision units, and that's funded throughout the entire budget. The estimates from that are included in the governor's recommended budget double count that. So the cost for the M300 adjustments, those are already in the budget, but they're also included in the calculation of the cost needed for the COLA. So it's double counted. It's not needed in the COLA cost because it's already funded elsewhere in the budget. So going down then, the second to last row where it says net of GovRec, that is what it would cost you all to fund everything that Ms. Kaufman and I discussed this morning. By first utilizing what the governor set aside for the enhanced compensation benefits in the governor's budget. So this is what you would need beyond that. So you can see in fiscal year 23 for the general fund, you would need to allocate an additional $31 million. In 24, that would be $21.7 million. And actually in fiscal year '25, the cost would be less than what the governor set aside in his budget for employee compensation benefits. The last row then is the total additional funding that you all would have to set aside by funding source for everything that we discussed this morning. So the all-in cost, that this is the in addition to what the governor already set aside. It's not the all-in cost, it's the difference that you would need to come up with. It's $40.1 million from the general fund, $125 million from the highway fund, and then other funding sources, $240.7 million. One last thing then for the money committees to consider. As I mentioned previously, it has been historical budget practice that general fund not be provided for COLAs or compensation benefits that are ongoing for employees that are funded by other funds, not by the general fund or the highway fund. However, given the magnitude of some of these increases, some budgets that are non-general fund budgets, non-highway fund budgets, so that are funded by federal funds, fee revenues, or other funding sources, may not have sufficient reserves or incoming revenue to fund all of these enhancements. And so you all may wish to consider setting aside some general fund in a salary adjustment account where agencies with these budgets could come over the biennium if needed and use general fund to fund some of these enhancements. The idea would be that over the biennium, these agencies would then work to make the necessary changes in their budgets to then be able to fund these enhancements on an ongoing basis using their existing funding sources. So a good example, I think, are internal service funds. They could, in the budget that they submit to the 2025 legislature, include these higher compensation amounts in the rates that they calculate and then charge to using agencies. And then they would have the funding needed to fund these enhancements. And I believe that is it, Madam Chair, and thank you all for your time this morning. And now we are happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
Thank you so much for that very thorough presentation. There are a lot of numbers. And members, before we go to questions of the staff, I've asked that you write all those down, but we're going to take a 10-minute recess, and we'll be right back for questions. Okay, well, that was a legislative 10-minute break. Thank you all for your patience. And members, you just had handed to you an additional worksheet document. I will have our fiscal analyst explain the document that you just received.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Sarah Kaufman, Legislative Counsel Bureau. You all should have received a revised copy of Attachment C that was in your work session document. In your work session document, D, I'm sorry, we're going to go to D. Okay, so the Attachment D has been revised. So if you take a look at the general fund grouping, the fourth line down, the amounts have been modified to account for a one-time bonus of $1,000 per year as opposed to $2,000 per year. So that would then decrease the amount that was included in Attachment D from $49,752,000 in each year of the biennium to $24,876,000. And that's the only change related to the options, which would have an effect equal to, if you look at the total additional funding required, that would actually, if you accumulate the 3 years, 23, 24, and 25, there would actually be a $9.6 million savings from what is recommended in the governor's executive budget compared to the addition that would be required for general fund appropriations that was included in your packet in the original Attachment D of $40.1 million. Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, and I'm sure we have a number of questions. So, members, if you'd like to ask a question, I believe Senator Neal will go first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I want to say great work to the chairs of this committee, so don't be mad at my questions. Okay, so the first question was related to the collective bargaining, the police collective bargaining. So can we expect that amount will be baked into the baseline of the next collective bargaining agreement?
Wayne Thorley, for the record, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. Chairman Moreno, through you to Senator Neal. When it comes to the cost estimates that we provided to you all in Attachment D, we are assuming that those enhanced compensation amounts are carrying forward through the biennium. As far as a question of what might be in the collective bargaining agreements between the state and these employee bargaining groups going forward, my understanding is those are currently in negotiation right now, and we do not have any information about what might or might not be being negotiated.
Thank you for that. Madam Chair, quick second question.
Go ahead. And if we can do our questions in order of our agenda, so the questions in decision unit number 1 for the retro pay. And if it's another decision, you could hold off the question
Okay,
until
I'll
we
wait.
get there.
I'll wait.
Okay. Are there any other questions for the first decision unit, the retroactive compensation questions? Yes, Senator Ganser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since we're going topic by topic, then I want to follow up and ask that 2% retroactive, that's limited to the folks who are part of those bargaining units. And so how much is the cost to the remainder of employees who are state employees but not part of the bargaining units? So there's equity between those groups.
Thank you for the questions. Wayne Thorley, for the record, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division Chair, through you to Senator Severs-Gansert.
You can go directly to the
Thank you,
member.
Madam Chair. Senator, So there were two different COLAs provided through the collective bargaining agreements. There was the 3% COLA for the bargaining groups in FY23, the current fiscal year. That was approved through the funding was approved through the pay bill last session. Then there's the retroactive AFSCME agreement that was an additional 3% in FY22, so last fiscal year. And then the Nevada Police Union one that you mentioned, that was only 1%. And those individuals covered by that agreement also got 1%, the 1% general COLA in the pay bill last year. And then this is an additional 1% in 23 for a total of 2% in 23. The governor's recommended budget, so the COLAs recommended by the governor in his budget for FY24 vary between 8% or 10%, dependent on whether the individual is covered by one of these collective bargaining agreements that had additional COLAs in the current biennium. So for state employees that only got the general 1% COLA in the current biennium, were not covered by a collective bargaining agreement that included additional COLAs, they would be recommended to get the 10% COLA in FY24, whereas those that were covered by enhanced collective bargaining agreements in the current fiscal year would get the 8% in FY24.
Thank you. Actually, I'm asking about a different amount. I'm asking about the retro for the April 1st of this year and moving forward. To my understanding, that was limited to a certain group of people. No. Are your numbers limited, or is that for everyone, the retro 2% add?
Thank you, Senator, for the clarification. I apologize. I did not understand the question. The money, the funding, or the cost in your information that we provided for you for the 2% retro, it wouldn't be retroactive, it'd be beginning April 1st, 2% COLA, that would apply to everybody, regardless of whether they're in covered by a collective bargaining agreement or not.
Thank you.
Assemblywoman Peters, did you have a question on this section?
Yes, Madam Chair, I do, and kind of an addition to what our colleague just asked about the arbitration awards, right? So I'm trying to understand, are we just looking at applying that going forward, or is there a section of that we're looking at? I believe we're going back to 2021, right? And then how is that going to be paid to employees? Is it being distributed in paychecks? Is it, I'm confused on, I guess, how we're making them whole through that period of time.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Peters. Wayne Thorley for the record, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. If you look at Attachment D, and you look at the second row from the top where it says retro applied, you'll see that there is funding in FY23, 24, and 25. And so the funding in FY23, so the general fund, highway fund, and other funds in FY23, that is the cost. You sum those up. That is the cost to pay for those retroactive COLAs in the current biennium. And then the funding in 24 and 25 on that line is for the cost to carry that forward, so continuing with those enhanced, the enhanced salary as a result of the COLAs, paying for that going forward. So not an additional enhancement, just carrying it going forward.
Okay, so, sorry, you look like you want.
No, you just had a second half of your question, and I had forgotten what it was.
So I guess I'm wondering about the difference in time, right, and pay between that 2021 where this was negotiated to apply, right, 2021, 2022, or I guess it wouldn't maybe just be 2022, and what's happened to that amount? Is it just we're not funding that piece and it's only going forward since it's come to this legislative body and not the previous legislative body? What's happened in that period of time?
Yeah. Wayne Thorley for the record, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. There is a bill, Senate Bill 440, that's been introduced in the Senate. It includes funding in the current fiscal year, so this biennium, to pay the total cost of those COLAs for the current biennium as if those employees had been getting it the entire time. As far as the how it would be administered, would they get a lump sum payment? I'm not sure how that would work, and we'd need to discuss with Division of Human Resource Management how exactly that would happen. But the funding estimates that we provided to you and that are also in the bill would cover the entire cost for the current biennium.
Thank you. That helps clarify for me.
Thank you. Members, any other questions in this decision unit? Okay. Senator Titus?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. Actually, it's page 1 of the presentation where you have down that we have 23,118 FTEs. And so I'm wondering, when these calculations were done, how, if it was done from the FTEs or the actual filled positions, because we have 20% vacancy here, we have 90 in some of them in your presentations, and I'm wanting to know, these figures that we're looking at, are they actual filled positions versus what we just went through with our Assembly bill, trying to give everybody a bonus, and there was miscalculations because they hadn't figured in the actual employees we have at the time?
Senator Titus, were you referring to the positions that were being included in the arbitration awards?
Right.
or-
My overall concern was all the data that you presented us on these costs. My question was raised really, literally from the start when you said, hey, there's 28,000 FTEs. So I'm wondering what you based from there on for the rest of the presentation on the cost of bonuses, on the cost of the negotiated salaries, and the actual cost to the state taxpayers, what it would take, and are you looking at, and again, the reason I asked is because of the issues that we ran in with the bill that we've passed to support the bonuses, because there was a true difference in calculations based on actual employees versus positions.
Thank you for the question, Senator Titus. Yeah, so the calculations vary for each of the different scenarios. So, for example, the bonuses. That was based on just total positions and not FTE, because the way that the bill was established was that each individual, regardless of their full-time or part-time status, would receive a $500 general fund bonus. The bill in its origination did not separate out revenue sources, so it was 100% inclusive of general funds. And so there were different ways that we looked at it in terms of the different situations where we may have applied a 20% vacancy factor just because of economies of scale. So in instances like, for example, the COLAs discussion, there was a 20% vacancy rate that was applied to that particular one because with the way that they are calculated, it's really based off of what an agency can absorb, so to speak, and then at the end of the fiscal year, if they don't have the funding to pay for the COLA, then they can go to the governor's finance office and seek reimbursements from this cost for the salary adjustment account, versus the bonuses were very much specific to general fund, and we had to have a very precise amount there because we weren't being allowed to use other revenue sources to offset those particular bonuses. So I think each of those instances, the calculation varied just slightly.
And if it's all right for a quick follow-up, for the PEB piece, we looked at PEB's enrollment projections for 24 and 25. So for each one of these pieces, as Ms. Kaufman said, we took an approach of what looks like a realistic scenario as far as what the funding need is going to be based on vacancy rates or employee counts or participant enrollment or anything like that to try and get as accurate of a number as we could.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question.
Thank you. Assemblyman Hafen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my question is a little more global than just the retro pay, but does apply. I think the biggest portion is the retro pay here. And it's in regards to the other funds. And I know you guys kind of touched on some of this, but I'm curious. I mean, there's a lot of different agencies that fall under this other category, whether it's DHHS, BNI, DCNR. You know, there's some of their subcategories, but some of these are self-funded or fee-funded through an enterprise fund, and some of it's federal money. And so my question is can these agencies afford what we're talking about here? And then my next question is, and you did kind of touch on this a little bit earlier, is that could we then, if they can't, could we for the biennium then do some bridge funding with some one-shots? And thank you, Madam Chair, for the indulgence.
Thank you, Assemblyman Hafen, for the question. Wayne Thorley for the record. The ability of agencies, non-general fund, non-highway funded agencies to afford this varies. There are fee-funded, other revenue source funded agencies that currently have very high reserves, where they could use reserve funding, and they've got lots of employees, so they got the economies of scale that Ms. Kaufman talked about. There are other agencies or budget accounts that are non-general funded where they may only have 2 or 3 employees. Maybe they don't have any vacancies, and maybe they don't have any reserves beyond what is needed in their budget to fund their operations. In those instances, that's where we mentioned the committee might want to look at setting aside a pot of money. It could be general fund money, so that these agencies could, if they cannot afford it with their existing funding sources, come and request an allocation from this pot of money and then fund those positions in the current biennium with the enhanced compensation benefits. And the idea going forward is that those agencies would have a chance to look at their budget over the interim, and if they needed to bring forward statutory changes or budgetary changes, they could bring that forward to the 2025 legislature to make those structural changes to allow them to afford these enhanced compensation benefits on an ongoing basis. What the amount of money that would be needed to be put into that pot, we'd have to do an analysis on that. But it's certainly an option for you all to consider, because there are, as you mentioned, Assemblyman, there are agencies that are non-general funded that currently do not have the existing funding in their budget to cover all of these enhanced compensation benefits.
Thank you. And just clarification real quick. You're saying that number A, we don't know what that number is yet, and that number is not included in what was just presented to us.
Assemblyman, that is correct. That the dollar amount of that is not included in any of the information that we presented to you. It would be in addition to all the dollars that we are in the table in attachment D.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the questions. Seeing no other questions for this section, we're going to move on. And members, I'm going to remind you, I'm sure you all know, the conversations we have today will help our fiscal staff in coming up with what will be included in our closing documents as we close out our budgets. We're going to start closing budgets in just a few days. But this conversation today helps our fiscal staff and then other departments here with us today understand how it will impact their departments as well. So moving on to the second item, which is retention incentive payments. Any questions on that decision unit? Well, that's strange. So seeing none, so members, as you go to page 7 of your documents for today, there are 3 choices that we can make when it comes to our closing. Attachment D that was handed out to you just before we came back from recess reflects the 3rd item in that decision box. And as the chair, joint chairs, that is the way we would be leaning of those three choices. Does anyone have any questions? Assemblywoman Hadigi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any questions, but I do want to make a comment. I mean, after sitting here, the last session and during our special sessions and having to make some cuts, I'm very happy to sit here and see this document and see what we have before us. I think what we're doing is something that we can all be proud of and something that all state employees will appreciate. So I just want to say that I'm proud to see this in front of us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Ganser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just for clarification, we're basically having the incentive bonus, including having the portion that we just allocated to NG. So we had put in $3.5 million for a half a year. So now they would get $3.5 million per year. And then all the other bonuses across the state would be $1,000 per employee.
Madam Chair, that is correct. So the Nevada System of Higher Education would receive the $3.5 million in each year of the 2023-25 biennium for their flat portion.
Senator Goicoechea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just need a clarification. We just passed a bill. It came out of this body yesterday. So that's and that will give us 500 for this until July 1st. And then this action will move it ahead, correct?
Senator Goicoechea, yes, that is correct. So the AB 268 was specifically related to fiscal year 2023. There will be other legislation being brought forth, I believe, by the governor that would continue this bonus on into 2024 and 25, and that's where that decision would be made.
Thank you. Just need that clarification. I'm sure everyone understood it, but I just wanted on the record.
Thank you. Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not a question, but just a comment. When we're talking about this particular decision unit, I really think the third one there is the way to go. I mean, there are bonuses, but I think what we're doing here is better than a bonus, frankly. And we're maintaining a bonus for the next 2 fiscal years, but when we looked at that sheet at the end of the document about what the employee's take-home pay would be, to me, this package altogether is just that. It's way better than a bonus, and so I'm very much in favor of still providing a bonus, but also looking at how to use some of that money for purse contributions, for those sort of things that really increase the take-home pay of the employees. So supportive of that.
Thank you. And for the benefit of those of you that don't have the sheets in front of you to know what we're talking about, it's to have a general fund appropriation of $24.9 million each year of the 2023-25 biennium to fund retention incentive payments of $250 per quarter for staff of PERS, the legislative branch, the judicial branch, the executive branch, inclusive of NCHE classified staff and inclusive of a flat amount of $3.5 million for NCHE professionals. That would be the decision unit. Okay, see no other questions. We'll move on to the third item on our worksheet, and that is cost of living adjustments. Any questions for that? Members, I will direct you to page 9 of your work session document. There's a decision to fund a 2% cost of living adjustment, which would be effective April 1st, 2023 for all state employees. And as staff mentioned, that's included in a bill that's coming through the legislative session. I believe it's SB 40. And to include the funding cost of living that were in GovRec. So if you look at that box, it's A, B, and C. Any questions? Senator Canizaro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to make sure that we were talking about all the things in conjunction with one another, so that there is some clarity. So, as I am seeing it, we are discussing approving a 2% COLA increase that would start April 1st and would continue through the end of this fiscal year, which ends at the end of June. That 2% would then be built into those salaries. There would be an additional 8 to 10% pay increase for the COLAs set to start July 1st of 2023. And then, in addition, on July 1st of 2024, it's an additional 4% that would be added to those salaries. And I just wanted that to be clear for the record, that it was 2 plus the 8 or 10, depending on what COLAs they had received in the last biennium, plus an additional 4.
And that is correct. Staff, did you have anything to add?
No, I didn't. I just would note that on page 9, there is that table in the middle that identifies the cumulative amount of all of those COLAs, so that's all inclusive.
Thank you. Senator Gansert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The governor had proposed a 2-step increase for all the public safety employees, and I don't see that reflected anywhere here. And in the example that you gave, it was using these numbers, but no 2-step increase. And so have you been able to look at that and calculate what that is? Thank you.
Wayne Thorley for the record. Thank you, Senator Severs-Gansert. Yes, so the 2-step increase for public safety employees was included in the governor's budget, is funded in the governor's budget. We didn't include any discussion on that here. If the legislature wishes to go forward with that, the legislature does not need to come up with any additional funding for that because it's already funded in the governor's budget. Those benefits would be on top of the other benefits that we discussed today. So that example 3 with a public safety employee doesn't account for that, and so that 2-grade increase would just further increase that person's salary if that is approved.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Follow-up. So if they do get the 2-step or grade increase, that actually dominoes into PERS and to other things. And so is that already built in to the governor's budget? Because all that's getting changed right now.
Senator Wayne Thorley for the record. That's a good question. Yeah, we actually will need to account for that, the kind of ripple effect of that. And when these numbers that we provided to you all today are our estimates as of today, we will come back with more refined estimates based off of the direction that we received today. And that is something that we will look at is what the ripple effect of that is for the 2-grade increases.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Peters, did you have a question? No? Okay. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we will move on. To item 4, which is our public employees retirement system. Members, you heard the presentation about the changes that would need to be, that are options that were presented today. And to complete those options, there would have to be some statutory changes, but are there any questions? Assemblywoman Kasama and then Senator Neal.
Thank you so much. I have 2 questions or comments on that area. The purse amounts here, is this, does this amount take into account the vacancies? Or is this a full amount for full-time equivalent employees?
Madam Chair, through you to Assemblywoman Kasama, yes, this does take into account a 20% vacancy rate associated with executive branch, judicial branch, and legislative branch, included into those accounts, and that was a 20% vacancy rate.
Oh, great. And I just, I do have concern with us looking at capping the cost, because that will continue to be a liability that grows and grows and grows. And then that's just, it becomes an unfunded liability for the taxpayers. That is a growing amount. So I do have concerns with that. But thank you for the answer.
You can go ahead and respond.
Madam Chair, for clarification, I would just note that this isn't necessarily capped at a specific percentage. It is capped at half a normal, so that rate will fluctuate as the contribution rates fluctuate from the actuary And so those rates will still continue to fluctuate. They just may not be as volatile as they have been in the recent biennium.
Senator Ganser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just need a little clarification on half of the normal rate, because when I think of a contribution rate of 35%, and usually it's 17.5, but if you do 35 and then half of 17.5, right, you end up with 26.25 and 8.75. So I don't know why the numbers are different, or if I'm misunderstanding something. So it's almost like a 75-25. So why isn't 75-25? It's a little more nuanced.
So the normal costs are different than the unfunded actuarially accrued costs. And so I would point you to page 11. So you could see a history of what the total rates have actually were composed of. So for example, just looking at fiscal year 2015, normal rates then were 16.56%, and the amortized cost of the unfunded liability made up about 11.9%. And then the administrative costs were about 0.15. And as you go through the various years, you can go all the way up to fiscal year 2022. In 2022, it looks like normal costs are fairly close to half and half with amortized costs, but that hasn't been the case. And so the normal costs would essentially just be the present value of the pension plan benefits for those state members, and the state employees would then not be providing for the costs associated with the unfunded mandate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So thank you. That's a huge clarification. So we have this big unfunded mandate, and so the state is assuming full responsibility for that, and then the employee is assuming half of the responsibility for their portion, because the rate's basically been combined for years and it's not broken out. So if we're looking at 2022 at the top, right now it is 50-50, so half of the 35% is because of the unfunded mandate. Thank you.
Madam Chair, that is correct.
Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was more of a comment. I'm just super grateful that this was even considered, because I know I brought that up earlier, and you, as the chair, were working out a solution on the PERS eating into any salary increase that we gave. And so I'm just super grateful that you worked out a solution.
Thank you. Members, any other questions on this section? See none, let's move on to the fifth item, and that is longevity payment restorations. See no questions. All right, I will direct your attention to page 16 in our work session document. There's a few decisions that we as a body will have to make as we close out our budgets and close out this legislative session. In discussion with Chair Dondero Loop, and in what we've heard in hearings here in this building, and knowing that a member of this body has a bill for longevity, it would be the chair's decision to go with B in that decision box in the top, and then B in the lower part of that decision. And that would be restoring longevity payments that were repealed by the 2015 legislature for state employees, including Nevada System of Higher Education professional employees, and fund PERS contributions consistent with existing policy for gross salaries, whereby the longevity payment would be reduced for those on the employer pay plan, PERS plan. Any questions? All right, seeing none. Then our last item would be 6, and that's the Public Employees Benefits Program, otherwise known as PEP, and the contributions for that. And our only decision that we need to discuss is whether or not we want to approve the additional health savings account and health reimbursement arrangement contributions based on the participants' coverage tiers. Any questions? Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just had one question. So the general fund that will go to HSA and HRA, did that include the projected numbers for the future?
Wayne Thorley for the record. Senator Neal, yes. So the general fund estimates that we provided for on the table on the top of page 19 take into account the enrollment projections provided by PEB for plan years 24 and 25.
Thank you for that. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Assemblyman O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to go to the attachment D under general funds. The additional of 125 million. Can highway fund afford that, or where's that going to come from highway fund? That's a fairly limited amount with not great fluctuation, if I understand correctly.
Yep. Wayne Thorley for the record. Assemblyman O'Neill, thank you for the question. There are several options that this body can consider to cover the highway fund portion of the cost of this benefit package. It's really going to be a policy decision for you all to decide where that comes from, as far as in conjunction with all the other recommendations in the budget to use highway fund. So I think the answer then is there will have to be some other decisions made in conjunction with this to make it work.
Thanks. I apologize about laughing. I like that last part. Other decisions made. I think that's this whole budget. I will compliment. I do like the intent of what we've been discussing today. Our state employees, if I may say, Chair, have been severely underappreciated for years, as displayed in some of your prior charts. I just want to make sure we're sustainable is what I'm scared of. So thank you, Chair, for the time.
Thank you. And believe me, when discussing doing what was best for our state employees, because they've taken the hit, and as you could see from one of the attachments from 1979 until now, this is my fourth time in this building, and it's the first time we've ever had money that we could actually do something with. And as a legislative leader, I felt we had a responsibility for the first thing we do to take care of those state employees who have been there when times were good, when times were bad. They stuck with us, right? And we've heard from agencies that have come before us to testify that they're having difficulty working with the state. One, because we don't have the staffing to do the job that we need to do as a state for our constituency. But we as a legislative body have a responsibility to do what's best for our employees, and the state employees are our employees. So the first thing we need to do this legislative session is to make them whole as much as we can. And if you look at what has been proposed today, our state employees' gross pay will increase by 18 to 31% over this next biennium if we're able to do everything that we've said here today. Yes, it's going to mean that there's some bills that are going to come before you that you're going to have to vote yes on so that we can do this. There's going to have to be some changes to what we do with the GST. Right now, there's a 25%, 75% split, may have to go back to 100% where it was supposed to be. There's going to be a lot of decisions that we as legislative leaders are going to have to make in the next 60 plus days to make sure that the document you have in front of us, we're able to pass to do what's right by the people who have been doing what's right by this state for years. So with that, does anyone else have anything? I'll go to Senator Gansert and then Senator Canizaro.
Madam Chair, thank you. And I think we all agree we want to make sure we support our public employees. I had one more first question. So we've got these two buckets. One's the normal cost, one's this unfunded liability. And so at what time do you start moving? We're always trying to fund 100%, but we know that we don't fund 100% of the liability. So when do you start shifting a new liability into the second bucket? Or does that always, do you understand what I'm saying? Because we have past, but it's always accruing, it's always getting bigger, partly because we're adding employees, and the structure of our PERS system does not fully pay for the benefits, the defined benefit that they receive. So that ends up shifting eventually. Does it shift eventually down to the second bucket, or how do you contemplate that working in the future?
Madam Chair, through you to Senator Gansert. So the unfunded liability is based on a 20-year amortization rate. And so that is then built into the contributions that are then actuarially determined by the PERS system. And so, for example, if there is a significant increase in employees as a result of all of this, you could potentially see more contributions going into PERS, which could then also offset those costs. So they would be getting more money in PERS, and those rates could be reduced. That is all determined every 2 years by PERS, and so it fluctuates. So it's difficult to say what's going to happen in the future, but ultimately the unfunded liability would be placed exclusively on the state.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so I guess it's just PERS is extremely complicated, and we have to, if you create separate buckets, then does the unfunded liability bucket gets a credit if they get ahead on the top bucket, the first bucket? That's what you're suggesting right now, and versus sort of a reset and starting over. So I think we just need to kind of understand how those would work moving forward if we were to do something like this. Again, because you're separating the buckets, but you're also suggesting that there's an overflow from one into the unfunded liability from the normal cost bucket. So anyway, we can talk about it later offline, but I just wanted to make sure everybody understood how complicated this PERS can be, the adjustments. Thank you.
We do understand how complicated it can be. That's why we've been working very closely with PERS as we put this document together. We will have the last comment from Senator Cannizzaro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I first just want to say that I want to echo your comments earlier, because I think what we're seeing here is something that is fairly unprecedented, and is a huge investment in where I think some of our greatest value is, and that's our state workers. They're the folks that provide all of these very essential services. We've all sat through these budget hearings. It's everything from children's mental health to education to our roads to our public safety. It is everything across the board, all these touch points. And the biggest touch point for every one of our constituents sort of starts and ends with state employees and how it is that they affect our constituents' lives. So if we're not investing in those people that are supporting all of us and the people that we represent, then we are doing a huge disservice to our constituents and to our state. And so, you know, when I look at something that is as comprehensive as this that we are looking at, that are addressing things like past owed arbitration awards for folks who negotiated for additional raises that need to be funded and that haven't been, for retention incentives so that folks can feel a little bit of extra money in their pockets to know that we do appreciate them, for the cost of living adjustments, which we know have been, and I think the data, and I want to thank fiscal staff for providing so much in terms of what we've seen since 1979, which is a very long history. And so I think that if you take a look at that and you look at some of this, it really does show, you know, that 2% plus the 8 or 10 plus the 4 is a huge investment to value those folks, to address things in PERS, which we know we have always heard about, right? Increasing rates. How can we make sure that employees can continue to serve our state and have a good retirement that they can count on in a way that doesn't leave them without the money to provide for their family? Contributions for HSAs and HRAs to make sure that health care is something that they can access and that is affordable for their families. These are, I think, more than just here's a little bit of pay. It's also investing in retirement. It's investing in healthcare. It's investing in our people. And I hope that everyone who is here and all of the agencies who've talked to us about the great work that their folks are doing, often doing 2 or 3 or 4 jobs, that they hear that we do appreciate them and we do value them. And we are going to take these steps in order to hopefully recruit and retain more of these really wonderful people so we can keep running the state of Nevada and keep providing those services for our constituents. So I'm just really appreciative of all the work that fiscal staff has done, because it has been a lot, to be able to come up with all of these pieces that fit together in a way that I think we should be proud to support, and I'm just very much looking forward to rounding out this legislative session with. So thank you.
Thank you. See no other questions or comments, we will close this presentation. I thank you. I thank you for the many hours and hours and hours of work put into this. And thank you to the agencies that are here in the audience that have been working with our fiscal staff to help us get to a place that we could actually present this document. So with that, we'll close the presentation and we'll move to the last item on our agenda, and that is public comment. And I gave out the number for public comment at the beginning of the meeting, but I will give it out again. You can call in at 888-475-4499. Our meeting ID is 832-490-42548, and then press pound. If there's anyone here in Carson City that would like to make public comment, please come up, fill in all the chairs. And I see someone in Las Vegas. You can fill in the chairs there. And we'll do something a little different. Since you're by yourself there in Las Vegas, we'll start in Las Vegas, and then we'll come to Carson City, and then we'll go to the phone lines.
Doug Unger, D-O-U-G-U-N-G-E-R, Nevada Faculty Alliance. Thank you, Chair Monroe Moreno, Chair Dondero Loop, and members of the Joint Committee for your discussion of compensation and benefits for state employees, and for remembering our teachers, professors, and researchers in higher education. Everything you're doing today, I think, will really make a big difference to state employees and to retention and hiring in higher education. And more than that, I think it will begin to shift a kind of sinking morale among state workers and among our faculty as soon as this message gets out. I appreciate all the work you're doing, and I actually don't know how you do it. This whack-a-mole game of the state budget that's kind of, it's kind of like a combination of a whack-a-mole game and the most complex game of Twister I've ever seen, the way you work it out across the board, as Senator Canizaro said. Thank you very much also to Mr. Thorley for making the suggestion about creating a separate fund for the non-state funded and self-funded employees. I think that's going to be important moving forward so we can keep this balance of funding state employees without incurring extra expenses on our citizens, including students. I'd just like to thank you all very much for what you're doing, and I'll pass the message on about how encouraging it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else in Las Vegas, we'll come up here to Carson City, and we'll start here.
Thank you and good morning, Madam Chair and fellow committee members. My name for the record is Terry Laird. I'm the Executive Director of RPEN, the Retired Public Employees of Nevada, where we have nearly 8,000 members, mostly retirees, but some who are actives and still working, in 17 chapters statewide. Created in 1976, our sole purpose, then and now, is to protect the pensions and health care benefits earned by all public employees while working, and especially once they've retired. Nevada PERS continually ranks high among its peers, thanks to conservative investments with low risk. However, as you've heard, high contribution rates for current workers means less take-home pay, especially for the entry-level workers who are currently being recruited to fill many of the current job vacancies at the state. We recognize this legislature is looking to fix that, and we also appreciate your efforts. However, a big deterrent to recruiting new state workers to fill these existing jobs could be due to some legislation passed a few sessions ago, eliminating retiree health care benefits for anyone hired after 2012. So the health care benefits received by current state workers hired before 2012 will not be extended to anyone hired after 2012. So that must also be addressed at some point going forward if recruitment issues are to be fully rectified. But RPEN also would like to see PEB benefits, including restoration of long-term disability and stability of life insurance benefits, return to pre-COVID levels during this session as well. We believe there may still be some federal dollars available that could be used at PEB for this restoration. But we know it used to be a privilege to work for the state of Nevada, and we look forward to a return to that going forward. And again, we greatly appreciate your efforts during this session addressing some of these issues. So from the retired public employees of Nevada, we say thank you.
Thank you. You can go ahead.
Good morning, Chair. Tess Opferman here on behalf of the ASME retirees. First, I think Mr. Unger said it very well. This feels like a game of Twister. And we so appreciate all of the efforts you all have been making the last few weeks. And in this hearing this morning, I know that we're a full 3 hours in, so it's complicated. It's a complicated topic, and we are very appreciative of all of those efforts. With that, I do have to get on the record the plight of retirees and our fight to reinstate some retiree benefits. We ask that you continue to remember state retirees. AFSCME retirees worked for the state of Nevada for years, in some cases more than 30 years, with certain promises made to them. One promise was full medical benefits. Changes to PEB made in 2011 took retirees who are 65 and older off the state medical plan and have moved them to Medicare Exchange. While they do receive HRA supplemental payments, many retirees are still paying out of pocket for medical costs in excess of their HRA. As we well know, healthcare costs increase yearly, and our retirees are bearing the burden of these costs. Meanwhile, retirees hired after 2011 and who are not yet 65 years of age get no medical coverage. This should be closely looked at when thinking about hiring and retention plans. Even more concerning are the benefits that we cut during the pandemic and have not yet restored. In particular, life insurance benefits and long-term disability were cut. Some retirees are not receiving Social Security, which means they have no access to long-term disability. Should they face a debilitating and long-term health situation, they have no disability coverage. Life insurance is equally important to our retirees. While burial costs have increased, we have cut benefits here in Nevada, meaning family members will bear the burden of these increased costs. Because of these cuts, our state is now benefiting from excess funds that can be distributed across the board. In looking at allocations, we strongly feel that the first decision to be made should be to restore all benefits to pre-pandemic levels. Retirees should not be forced to continue bearing the burden of benefit cuts when the state is in a strong fiscal environment to restore these. As conversations continue, we strongly urge you to consider our retirees and restore all benefits to pre-pandemic levels. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Kent Irvin, Nevada Faculty Alliance. For 40 years, we have been working to empower our members to be fully engaged in our mission to help students succeed. I'd like to echo the comments of Professor Unger, Ms. Laird, and Ms. Opferman. These are just so positive actions, the COLAs, longevity payments, the shift in PERS contributions will just be a game changer for our employees. I'm going to have to listen to this session again to really figure out what everything, because it is complicated, but we'd just like to express our great appreciation. On one point that was brought up at the end about the normal cost of PERS, I believe that the assumptions that PERS is now making really do mean that the normal cost is the future actuarial normal cost more than it may have been in the distant past. And so that employees paying half of that in the PERS system is a fair policy going forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good morning, afternoon, whatever time it is. Rick McCann, Nevada Association of Public Safety Officers and a member of Nevada Law Enforcement Coalition. At the risk of being inappropriate, which has never stopped me in the past,
Thank you. Next.
Good morning. My name is Mark Sukrov. I'm here today to add some personal experience to the letter and the supporting materials I submitted as an exhibit at public comment to the committee's meeting here today. But before I speak, I do want to say I appreciate all the efforts that were made today and all the comments and discussion that happened today. It's very encouraging. For the record, I'm an engineer employed at the Nevada Department of Transportation, NDOT, but I'm here on my own time representing myself. Over the past few years, I've seen many talented, skilled, and experienced engineers leave NDOT for other firms and local government agencies for higher pay and better benefits. And unfortunately, I've seen the trend dramatically increase in the last year. These previous employees range from resident engineers responsible for administering the largest construction projects in the state, to project managers who coordinate design and assist in coordinating the construction of multi-hundred-million-dollar projects, to roadway engineers responsible for the accurate design and integration of safety and efficiency in the layout of the traveling public's roadways, to geotechnical engineers responsible for the accurate foundation, design, stability, and durability of the state's roads and bridges. The people who have left NDOT are not just newly recruited employees. Many, and of the people I can immediately think of, actually, all of them are very experienced people who have been with NDOT for many years and were thought of as the next wave of leadership at NDOT. I can't express enough that the losses due to these personal departures from NDOT are severe. And unfortunately, there are several highly valuable NDOT employees watching the outcome of this legislative session closely, hoping for a change, which sounds like there is going to be one, while at the same time eyeing the exit door. I think NDOT employees do a good job of providing the citizens of NDOT with high quality and cost-efficient projects with well thought out delivery methods. But if NDOT keeps losing key personnel like it has been, its ability to continue to provide these projects in the same desirable manner will be severely hampered. Please look closely at the suggestions I made in my submitted letter and at the options presented to you today for possible changes to NDOT employees, and please strive to make pay and benefits at the very least more in line with local government agencies, which sounds like there's some good work that's being done on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Carter Bundy with AFSCME. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been a long time coming. I've only been working in the state since 2017, but a lot of these issues have come up over and over again where we've known that we've been 30 to 40% behind other states, local jurisdictions, and we've had massive vacancy problems that really got worse over the last few years. And to see this body take on this level of work to make sure that the state can finally get the right staffing levels, the right compensation levels, to fund the arbitration. And I know the majority leader did a lot of work on that, and so we thank her for that. But really to all of you, we know this is a team effort, outstanding leadership, and this is going to make a huge difference, not only in the lives of the state employees, but in the services we provide to all Nevadans. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Susie Martinez, and I am the Executive Secretary Treasurer of the Nevada State AFL-CIO. And on behalf of over 150,000 members and 120 unions, including our hardworking state employees, we applaud these significant measures to ensure that we provide a long-term solution that it will create a better future for the state of Nevada. These measures today would help recruit and retrain employees in state agencies, which are experiencing a 21% overall vacancy rate. I'd like to thank this body for taking on this important issue and demonstrating to the state workers that we are serious about recruiting and retaining our hardworking state employees. And for that, I thank you for your privilege. I thank you for the privilege of your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
For the record, my name is Mark Ellis. I'm with Communication Workers of America. On behalf of the state printers, I would like to thank you guys very much for what you've done.
Thank you. See no one else for public comment here in Carson City. Do we have anyone on the phone lines that would like to make public comment?
If you would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 now. Chair, there are no callers choosing to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you. Well, members, thank you for your patience, your comments, your questions. This was a very important work session. And for some of us, we got to get across the lawn. So this meeting is adjourned, and I'll see you in the old chambers.